The year 1914 marked a catastrophic collision between 19th century military thinking and 20th century industrial power. Generals who had studied Napoleon's campaigns suddenly found themselves commanding armies equipped with rapid-fire artillery, machine guns, and chemical weapons. The result was a form of warfare that nobody had anticipated and nobody knew how to win. Traditional military doctrine emphasized mobility, decisive battles, and the supreme importance of morale over material. But the brutal reality of industrial warfare told a completely different story. A single Maxim machine gun, operated by a well-trained crew, could fire 600 rounds per minute, equivalent to the firepower of an entire 19th century infantry company. Artillery pieces could hurl shells weighing hundreds of pounds across distances that would have been unimaginable to earlier generations of soldiers. The mathematics of defensive warfare were brutal and unforgiving. An attacking force needed a numerical advantage of at least 3-1 to have any realistic hope of success against properly entrenched defenders. But the trench systems of World War I were defended by interlocking fields of fire, pre-registered artillery zones, and physical obstacles that channeled attacking forces into predetermined killing zones. Even overwhelming numerical superiority often wasn't enough to break through. Consider the revolutionary weapons that defined trench warfare. The machine gun, perfected in the late 19th century, transformed infantry tactics overnight and forever. No longer could soldiers advance in the massed formations that had dominated European battlefields for centuries. Artillery, meanwhile, had become devastatingly accurate through mathematical precision. Forward observers could direct fire onto targets they couldn't even see, using complex calculations to drop shells within meters of their intended impact points. Chemical weapons introduced an entirely new dimension of mechanized horror. Chlorine gas, first used by the Germans at Ypres in April 1915, created absolute panic among troops who had no protection against this invisible, choking killer. As primitive gas masks were hastily developed, more sophisticated chemical agents quickly followed. Phosgene, which was even deadlier than chlorine, and mustard gas, designed to bypass existing protection or cause horrific casualties even through protective equipment. The race between offensive and defensive technology drove innovation at an unprecedented pace that consumed entire national economies. When barbed wire proved devastatingly effective at stopping infantry attacks, artillery tactics evolved to cut wire barriers with massive preliminary bombardments. When those bombardments proved insufficient, entirely new types of shells were developed. High explosive rounds designed specifically for wire cutting, and later, chemical shells that could neutralize defenders without destroying their defensive positions. The development of the tank represented perhaps the most dramatic and desperate attempt to restore mobility to warfare. These early armored vehicles were crude, mechanically unreliable, and extremely vulnerable to artillery fire, but they offered something that had been missing since the first trenches were dug: the ability to cross no man's land while providing some protection for advancing infantry. The first major tank attack at Flers-Courcelette in September 1916 advanced further in a few hours than most infantry attacks had managed in months of bloody fighting. Aircraft technology evolved with similar breakneck speed, driven by military necessity. What began as fragile, unarmed reconnaissance planes quickly developed into specialized fighters, heavy bombers, and dedicated ground attack aircraft. Aerial photography allowed commanders to map enemy trench systems in unprecedented detail. Fighter aircraft engaged in desperate battles for air superiority, while bombers targeted supply lines and troop concentrations far behind the front lines. Communication technology struggled desperately to keep pace with rapidly evolving tactical requirements. Telephone systems were extremely vulnerable to constant artillery fire. Early radio equipment was bulky, mechanically unreliable, and easily intercepted by enemy listeners equipped with direction-finding equipment. Visual signaling methods, flags, lights, heliograph mirrors, were effective over short distances but completely useless in bad weather or under direct enemy observation. The industrial capacity required to sustain trench warfare was absolutely unprecedented in human history. Britain alone produced over 170 million artillery shells during the war, more ammunition than had been manufactured in all previous conflicts combined. Steel production, chemical manufacturing, and precision engineering all expanded exponentially to meet seemingly endless military demands.